time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
I want to say a big good evening going out to each and every single one of you tonight. Saturday night, 6 o'clock. World Jam Global Radio. It's Issues Today.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in.
Got a big story lined up for you tonight.
You know, gangster life is too short to spin it all.
Speaking live to Heather McLeod.
Cope with this living hell. Already did my
brother of sister of David Johnson.
Already did my time. I paid for my
I got to hear about this story only a very short time ago.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
And felt compelled to share it.
Did my time. I paid for my crime.
Young man goes off to a party with his brothers.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
And over 2 years later, front door goes in, finds himself face charged with murder.
More drugs and superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time.
Next week we've got a very, very interesting
Already did my
show for you. I've got Nancy West as my guest next week.
Did my time.
And after next week I'll be taking a 2-week break, a holiday out there in the Caribbean. But the next week we're looking at officer-involved domestic violence. That's right. The wives of police officers subjected to domestic violence, swept under the carpet, have been kept very quiet indeed. We're going to expose that right here on World Jam Global Radio's Issues Today next week. But this week,
in the pen, statewide, worldwide, there was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street.
We've entitled this week's show, My Brother's Innocent.
The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand.
And Heather McLeod makes no bones about standing in her brother's gap.
In jail.
We're going to hear very shortly
in hell.
How this story all came to pass. And we're going to review, discuss, and unravel the facts as we find them.
For my crime.
She's getting herself ready as we speak.
Crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
So wherever you are around the country, around the globe, around the world, my name's Kervin, Julien. This is World Jam Global Radio, and it's another edition of Issues Today.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Wow. trying to cope with this living hell.
Well, without no further ado, I want to introduce you to my guest, and I hope she's there on the end of the line as we speak, is Heather McLeod. How are you, Heather? Hello, Heather. Hello, Heather.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Okay, you there?
I am here. My headphones are not working.
Okay. All right. Can you just start off by telling people a little bit about yourself, who you are and where you are and what you do, and then we'll go into why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Heather McLeod. I am currently living in Wentzville, Missouri. My brother David and we grew up here. We're from the St. Louis area. And for the last 7 years, I've been advocating for David and others that have been wrongfully convicted here in the state of Missouri.
And did you start advocating for others before David's incarceration, or was David's incarceration a catalyst for you to get involved in advocating?
Yeah, absolutely. Up until I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, I actually had no idea that, wrongful convictions were so much of a big issue that they are. And with the help of some great fellow advocates, I was able to learn a lot and be guided in steps for helping David fight for his innocence. And along the way, I've been able to make a lot of good friends and help them fight for their loved ones as well.
The funny thing is the wrongful conviction community is a very loving, supporting and encouraging community. So as you find yourself getting involved in these type of things, you tend to find that people will just come around and put their arm around you and support you and just help you along the way, because everybody knows just how difficult a situation it is because they're going through it themselves, right?
Absolutely. And it's definitely one of those things where you don't know the pain behind it, and you don't know how much of an issue it is until you have a loved one in that situation. We've been lucky enough, David has been lucky enough to gain many supporters, those that have experience with, fellow loved ones that have been wrongfully convicted, and even those that have just heard David's story and that feel compelled and really have reached out and have tried to help in many ways.
Well, we are going to try and talk. I mean, I will tell you that we're getting a lot of wind interference where you are at the moment, which will affect the quality of the broadcast. But we'll try and muddle through, and we'll try and work our way through this. Okay. So first, I've only got I don't actually have much information, so I'm going to be relying on you to give us as much information as possible, and then we're going to try and unravel this and talk about it and try and see how we can explore and expose the situation that got your brother in the situation that he is. So maybe you can just start off by just telling us the story. I mean, I remember as you wrote to me, he was 15 and he had been taken off to a party by his older brother and some others, or what? Can you just go back through that for us again and just tell us exactly what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So this all happened in New Year's 2008. David was 15 at the time. He was hanging around with mine and David's, our older brother. His name was Matthew. Matthew was 18, and Matthew was friends with another man named Matthew who was also 18. And the way that it was explained to David is there was a New Year's Eve party. David was invited, so he went with Matthew, Samantha, who was also 15, Laura, who was 18, and then another girl by the name of Amy, who was 18 or 19 at the time. He went out to this party. I'm sorry. He went out to this party. That was about 30 to 40 miles from where we were living, and the party was initially taking place at Matthew Marshall's house, which was the gentleman that invited him. And about a block away, there was another party taking place. They went to this party, and they, I guess, just decided that it really wasn't for them. There was a lot of people there, so they ended up traveling back to Matthew Marshall's house. After doing that, Matthew Marshall received a phone call from a woman named Tawn that said, please get back down here. I'm being jumped. I need your help. So Matthew Marshall and Matthew Johnson, they got this phone call while they were in a separate room. Are they still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, they got this call while they were in a separate room. Once they got this call, they went into the living room where David Johnson, my brother, and Samantha Smith were, the minors, and they told them, Tawn is being beat up, we need to go and get them. With this, all of them pile in the car, including the woman that I told you named Amy. Once they get to the residence where the crimes took place, Amy was actually the daughter of the homeowner's house where they were going. So she opens the door and she tries to shut it on Matthew Marshall. Matthew Marshall pries through the door. Matthew Johnson followed. At this point in time, David Johnson and Samantha were just getting out of the back seat of the car. They go up to the steps. They try to enter the home, not knowing what was going on. As they entered the home, Samantha, the 15-year-old minor, gets swung at with a bat and hit, breaking all of the fingers on her left hand, trying to block her head. After this happened, Matthew Johnson, our older brother, stabbed the owner of the home, the 40-year-old man who hit Samantha with the bat. Once that happened, Matthew looked at David, who had not even taken 2 steps inside the house, looked at David, said, "Get Samantha out of the house." David did so. He grabbed Samantha. They both ran to the car. Samantha was crying. David was trying to console her. Moments later, Matthew Johnson and Matthew Marshall ran to the car, and then they pulled off.
Okay. And Matthew Johnson is your older your brother.
Correct.
Okay. Is that your older brother?
He is. He's 18 at this point in time. It was 2008. I was 16, and David was 15.
Okay, and he was 18 at the time.
Yes.
And so from what I'm gathering, right, the whole scenario that was taking place was a response by them to a situation where a friend of theirs were under attack by people who had turned up that were unfriendly, that were tooled up as well by the sounds of it with a baseball bat and whatever. And even though Matthew Johnson used what some might perceive to be excessive force by stabbing, even carrying the knife in the first place, it was as a response to what was taking place via the attack that was taking place on the lady, I take it. Hello, are you there?
Although Matthew Johnson and Matthew Marshall, there were other incidents that took place in the home. I told you from David's point of view what exactly happened, because like I said, he walked in for a very brief moment, seen something, he was told to get out of the house, and he did. However, Matthew Johnson and Matthew Marshall, they ended up stabbing 2 different men. Definitely, like I agree with you, excessive force. They ended up stabbing 2 different men. One man lost his life, and another man was put on life support. They did say, Matthew Marshall and Matthew Johnson, in their statements and even in court, that they were trying to defend the woman. But yes, that is what happened. The knife that Matthew Johnson was using, he actually just got 2 days prior to that. It was a pocket knife, and it was a decorative pocket knife, and it was a Christmas gift from our father.
Okay, I'm with you so far. So, as far as the 2 Matthews are concerned, did they plead guilty to the charges that were laid against them?
They did.
Okay, so they pleaded guilty. They did the crime. They knew what they did. and they were punished accordingly. And how quickly were they charged after that incident, and how quickly were they convicted?
They were both charged that evening with murder and assault, tampering with evidence, and armed criminal action, along with first-degree burglary. They were both charged that evening. They admitted their crimes within a 1 to 2 day period after all of this took place. Matthew, I believe it was 2 to 3 months after that, he was convicted and sentenced. He received 24 years in prison. However, Matthew Marshall, he made a deal with the prosecuting attorney's office that if he were to come up with any other information that would help them with their case that night, he would get a deal with his sentencing. So this leads us up to where David is arrested 2 years later. Okay,
so here we are, 3 months after the event. They're convicted, sentenced, etc. But there's a little side door left open for Matthew Marshall, who's been told that if he's got any other information that he wants to. So was any of that other information volunteered at that time?
No.
Because what I'm wondering is why has it taken 2 years for the officers to then come and pursue David?
That's actually a question that, anybody that I've ever told this story to, and anybody that's even heard the story, even at David's trial, I would say out of the 75 jurors, there was at least 5 of them that got up and walked out because they obviously couldn't willingly walk out, but they were highly upset that the prosecuting attorney wasn't giving them any answers as to why David was arrested 2 years later and then sat in a jail cell for 6 years waiting for his day in court. I can't answer that question. All I know is that Matthew Marshall, after pleading guilty to these crimes, he was given a deal that if he were to give any other information helping with the case, that he would get a deal on his sentencing. David was only 15 at the time. He was only charged with being out past curfew.
Okay. So
on December 22nd.
Let's start talking about David a bit, shall we? What I'd like to be able to do at this moment in time is try to characterize David so we can get an idea what type of a guy David was. So the first question I'm obviously going to ask you is, was David at that point, even though as young as he was he already known to the police for any purpose?
Was he what? I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, was he known to the police, law enforcement? What was he known to them for any reason?
No, absolutely not. As a child, he hung around with Matt quite a bit, and there were, I believe, 2 different times that Matt had stolen items from our neighbors, and because David, he hung around with Matt at times, although he wasn't supposed to, he was known as Matt's little brother. That's how he was known. Never himself was he ever in trouble with the police.
Okay. So
he never had any history.
So he's got no history, no previous convictions, no acts of violence.
No, none at all.
Okay. So what was David like at school?
David actually did really well in school. He had decent grades, but everybody loved him. He had so many friends. He enjoyed going to school. He enjoyed being around other people.
Okay.
His teachers liked him. He was never getting in trouble.
So he had a good reputation at school.
Yes, he did.
He was liked by his teachers. And
correct.
You also say that David did a lot of hanging around with Matthew when he was younger, but did he also have a lot of friends, peers that were his own age group, for example?
Yeah, and whenever I say hanging around with Matthew was in and out of our home because he was getting in trouble a lot. So, he would go to juvie and then he would come home and he would end up right back in juvenile. David, he grew up with me and my mom, so it was a house full of girls. Whenever Matthew was around, David just, he was hanging out with his older brother. And David never really got into any trouble with Matthew. He just, it was a boy for him to hang out with that was inside the house.
Okay. So most of his time was spent hanging around with people his own age.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Most of his time was spent hanging out with me and my friends.
Okay.
But we all had the same friends. David and I are very close in age. We were actually in the same grade. We all had the same friends. We went to skating rinks. We did normal kid activities.
Was David into sports? Did he like sports or athletics, or what sort of thing did he like to get up to?
He liked video games and board games. That was kind of our thing. We were a very, tight-knit family growing up, and that's what we did. We played board games and video games.
Okay. So, in all sorts of forms of respect, David was your average 15-year-old kid.
Yes, he was, yes.
But without the previous convictions, without the police records, without the trouble, and definitely without the reputation that his older brother had.
Absolutely.
So now what I'd like you to do is to take me to that night. Were you at the house that night when the police came for him? Who was at the house that night? Can you guys recall what took place? What was going on that evening, for example? Was it...
Yeah, absolutely. We were at my home. David lived with me and my husband and my two small children. It was December 22nd, 2010. We were actually getting ready to travel to my mom's house, approximately 2 miles away from where we lived, for a Christmas dinner. We got a knock on the door. My husband answered, and it was the police. They yanked my husband out of the house, assuming that he was David. Once they realized he wasn't David, about 4 or 5 police officers barged into my home with their, they had dogs with them. David was in the back room playing video games. They pulled David from his room, dragged him all the way down the hallway into the living room, placed him in handcuffs. They sat him on the ground, and they told him that if he moved, that their dogs would bite his blank throat out.
Okay. And so, at that point, did they make it clear what they were coming for him for? Did they explain? Did they explain what the charge was, or what their reason for bursting?
They did not. No, they didn't. They didn't read him his Miranda rights. They didn't do anything. We absolutely had no idea what was going on.
And I suppose, and quite quickly, he was taken away then.
He was, yes.
Okay. And from the moment that he was taken away, how much was explained to anybody that was left in the house, you, your mother, or anybody else, as to why your younger brother had been removed from the house and arrested in this fashion?
I didn't have any answers until the next morning, whenever I finally got a hold of his public defender. And his public defender told me that although 2 weeks prior to this, it was thrown out of family court because there was no evidence against David, that the state picked the case up.
So it went to family court, and because there was no evidence against him, it was thrown out.
It did, correct. June 2010, whenever David turned 17.
Here's the thing. Let's just pause there for a second. So it went to juvie court, right? And because there was no evidence, it was thrown out. Right? Let's just clarify that. So why wasn't David released?
Because the state...
If that's the only reason that they've arrested him, they've come to his home, they've arrested him for this particular incident, it's gone to court, and there's no evidence, so it's thrown out of court. He should have been released at that moment. He should have been released.
Not in Missouri. It's a state law.
But
he doesn't have to be... There is no age limit based on the crimes. Because he was 15 years old, and because of the crimes that he was being accused of, if juvenile court decides that they do not want to try him in Missouri, the state of Missouri can try him as an adult.
At the age of 17.
But I thought what you said was it was thrown out because there was no evidence. It wasn't thrown out because of the seriousness of the crime or his age. I thought what you said was it was thrown out because there was no evidence. And if there was no evidence, there's actually nothing to hold him for. He needed to be released at that point.
Family court can use their own discretion. They did not believe that there was enough evidence to charge David with a crime. Family court can pick up the case. They decided that they were not going to try him. But when he turned 17, the law of Missouri is that the state can try him as an adult.
So they kept him in custody till he got to his 17th birthday.
No, I'm sorry. Okay, so the night that this crime took place, David was only charged with being out past curfew.
Okay.
We didn't hear anything from any court until David turned 17. Once he turned 17, a detective came to my door and said that they needed to talk to David to ask him more about what happened that night. David complied. David answered all of their questions. That is when we found out that Matthew Marshall made a deal with the state's prosecuting attorney and that he gave false information about David in order to receive a lesser sentence. The court did everything that they needed. David got a public defender. The prosecuting attorney worked on building her case against David in the juvenile system. Whenever David went to family court, he stood in front of the judge. David and his public defender, they explained why David was innocent. They beat the case in family court. Approximately a month later is whenever the state of Missouri picked charges up and came to our home and arrested David. The only explanation we got about how that could even happen is from the public defender, and he explained it to me exactly how I'm explaining it to you. Although family court didn't feel like they needed to take his case, they felt like there was not enough evidence to prove David's guilt. The state of Missouri has the right to charge him as an adult based solely on the crimes. You can't do that in family court, but charging him as an adult, which they did since he was 17 now, they have every right to put him in a jail cell for 6 years, apparently, waiting for them to build a case and convict him.
And what you're saying to me now is it took 6 years to build that case?
It did, correct. They arrested David December 22nd, 2010. David's attorneys, I would say maybe 2 times, top 3 times, continued the trial date. The prosecuting attorney's office, the state, they continued the trial and postponed it. I can't even tell you how many times for 6 years. David was arrested December 22nd, 2010. He didn't even get his day in court until February of 2016.
Wow. So what was they building? A monument?
You would think, no. So just to, I'm going to jump further a little bit because we never got any answers on why it took so long for the trial to actually take place. What I do know is during trial, the state, only 2 witnesses, one of them changed her statement and about David 6 different times. Her final statement that she gave on David, she was crying and said she actually had no idea where David was whenever all of this was taking place. Matthew Marshall, the man that made the false accusation against David to get his sentence lowered, he recanted on the stand. So, in my opinion, the prosecuting attorney's office, it was a very small town. They were trying to make a name for themselves. They had a man that they were able to pretty much, twist by the arm. And by doing so, he agreed, okay, I will give you information regardless of whether or not that information is true or not. But for 6 years, there was so much back and forth. They didn't have a steady hand to go into court with. There was absolutely no guarantee that they were going to win their trial date. They couldn't postpone it any longer. They got very, very lucky in trial, if you would call it luck. In my personal opinion, the trial was botched. We don't have paid attorneys. We don't have money for private investigators to prove it. But David was thrown under the bus, and it was a corrupt trial.
You know, the funny thing is, we often hear time and time again in wrongful conviction cases where people have been sentenced to things that they haven't done, and they've been exonerated. We normally find at the end, it's 9 times out of 10, they've not been able to afford proper representation, and they've just been let down by the system time and time again. What I want to get to now is, if Matthew Marshall and Matthew Johnson had pleaded guilty, were there any eyewitnesses that gave statements as to what took place at the time that the individuals were stabbed?
Many. I have copies of all of this. I would say at least 5 to 6 statements that said that they've seen the whole thing. And it was Matthew Johnson and Matthew Marshall that busted the door down and that committed these crimes. Never, not one person in their initial statement mentioned anything about David, not even mentioning David being in the living room where the crimes took place. You say in their initial statements. Did they go on to change their statements to include David afterwards then? The only 2 people that changed their statements after their initial statement was Amy Post and Matthew Marshall. Both of them had motive to lie about David. And even since changing their statements and mentioning David's name, they have since then changed their statements and have not mentioned David's name. Okay, so the American justice system really confuses me. It is very confusing. Absolutely. And the weight of proof that the prosecution has to bear when bringing around a conviction for a crime as serious as murder, which carries a sentence that could take you up to life and beyond, the burden of proof needed. Normally, the amount of times in America, for example, it can be taken on the word of someone who is also convicted and has done a deal. That wouldn't happen in this country. You would need more evidence from someone else who didn't have anything to personally gain in order for somebody to actually stand up and say, well, hang on a minute, there might be something to buy into here. So what was David's defense in all of this? What was David's account? Because he must have made a statement as to his whereabouts and his positioning as that night went on and as things took place. What was David's statement like? What did he say in defense of himself? He never made one. He was advised by his attorneys not to. So he never made a statement to either defend or incriminate himself? No, he never made a statement. He was advised by his attorneys, and that's kind of another issue why David was wrongfully convicted, was the defense of his attorneys. But no, David asked to, and he was told that he shouldn't by his attorneys. I think it might be premature of me, but for me, I already see how that could turn against him, unfortunately. And that was bad advice by his attorneys. So his attorneys, what was the relationship like with his attorneys and him and his family? Did you guys get on with his attorney? Did they share much information with you? Did they fill you in on what was going on? I'm sorry. I'm trying to hit speaker. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? You're breaking up quite a bit. Okay, I apologize. I was having David calling me on the other line. Okay. You said David was calling you on the other line? He was. Yes, I apologize. Okay, no, whenever he called, it knocked me off. No, it happens here on my, because I use Skype on my phone as well. What I tend to do is I put it on silent on this end,
so that if a call comes in, it doesn't interfere with my call, and I can just reject it when I feel like. But I know what it's like. But again, the question that I was asking was, what was the relationship like between David's attorneys with him and David's attorneys with the family? Did they share much information? Did they fill you in? Did they let you know what they were doing and pre-steps, etc., and how they were going to follow this case through and what they were going to do for David in order to support him in trying to win this win this case?
No, actually, whenever David was in Warrenton, that is the jail that he was in, he got a letter from a girl that was in Montgomery County Jail. And this girl told David that she had heard about his case and that she truly felt for him. And they grew a relationship based around God and their Christian belief. 2 weeks before David went to trial, the woman that he had built this relationship with stated that her family had money and that they didn't want David to go into trial with a public defender. They felt that David would have better odds with a paid attorney. So this family put up the money for David to go into trial with a paid attorney. This paid attorney was on David's case for 2 weeks before trial. I had never met him. My mother had never met him. David had met with him a couple of times, but we had absolutely no idea what their defense was going to be going into trial. Trial was, like I said before, completely corrupt. They did not defend David to the best of their abilities. There were lies that were coming out of the prosecuting attorney's mouth. They did not defend David at all. As a matter of fact, whenever they gave David their decision after the jury was done briefing, the paid attorney that this woman hired for David left, didn't even stick around to hear the decision. After all of this happened, we realized what was going on. It was the attorneys were hired on David's behalf to throw David under the bus. They were never paid attorneys to help David with his case. I got into contact with a couple of attorneys after David's trial, and one of them actually told me that the woman that hired the attorney for David was making a deal with the prosecuting attorney's office, and if she could get David to in any way implicate himself, that she was going to get a deal on her end as far as what she was in jail for. Whenever I spoke to this attorney, he knew this woman's name and he knew exactly what she was up to, and David wasn't the only person that she did this to.
Wow. And so during the trial, did David get an opportunity to... So if David didn't make a statement, I guess that means that he never got into the stand either.
He did not, no.
Did Matthew Marshall go on the stand on David's trial?
He did.
Okay, and did Matthew Johnson go on the stand on David's trial?
He did not.
And why would that be?
The attorneys said that it was not a good idea. Matthew Johnson was there on David's behalf, and the attorneys told David that his statement wasn't needed. So they transferred him back to the prison that he was in and didn't let Matthew.
But you've got the two people that have pleaded guilty to committing the crime. One says he was there, and the other one says that he wasn't. But yet only the one who said that he was there is allowed to give evidence. That just doesn't sound fair and balanced.
It was not fair at all, and because we were thrown in.
So where was the objection?
On our behalf, on David's behalf?
Yeah, on his defense's behalf. Where was the objection? But why, you know? And did
the very few times that they tried to object anything, the judge overlooked it completely. Any time that our attorneys for David even tried to speak, they would be cut off by the judge.
I'm struggling to see how a defense could justify being paid for representation on something that they've actually not represented by law, full stop. and I'm struggling to see how.
We're working with that we're going through our appeal right now with David, and that's what we're working on. Whenever I called David's attorney after all of this happened to get questions and get answers, or I'm sorry, to ask questions and get answers, I told them that I spoke to another attorney who knew Ashley's name and who said that they were never there to be at David's defense and to represent David the proper way. They told me that if that was true, they had nothing to do with it, but they wouldn't put it past the woman that hired him. And I told him, I'm like, excuse me, I'm sorry, but that makes absolutely no sense. You're telling me that you believe that, you know that David was wrongfully convicted. You know that he shouldn't be in the position he was in, but you're telling me that you had nothing to do with it. That makes absolutely no sense. They have yet the agreement was that this family that was supposed to be paying them, they put up $10,000. We were supposed to put up $2,500. I've tried to get in contact with them just to see if they will take our money, and they won't even call us about our money. I don't think that they realize they have a kid that comes from a family with absolutely no money. They know that I don't have money. They know that my mom doesn't have money. I don't think that they realized that we cared this much to dig deeper. They didn't think that we were going to get the answer that we needed to get in order to prove David was wrongfully convicted. And since then, he's had so many supporters. He's even had a TV show done about him. And, the truth is going to come out.
What TV show took up David's story?
It is a new TV show on the ID channel, Investigation Discovery, and the show is called Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, I've seen it.
He was the third episode for the first season.
Wow. So he's gaining some interest as far as his conviction is concerned.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. This TV show did a lot for David. He has supporters that send him mail and that even get in contact with myself and our mom from all around the world, the UK, Canada, and all over the United States.
How is David coping in prison? How is he coping with prison life?
He is making the best of it. After trial, it took a lot of convincing from us to get him through it and to, keep instilling it in his mind that it's not over. We're going to keep fighting. At this point in time, he's very excited about this radio show. He's hopeful, but he has learned to accept it because he can't get anywhere behind walls without accepting it.
Okay, so he's coping with it. Is it what sort of category prison is he in? Is he in one of those very tough prisons, or is he in a youth prison? Over here in the UK,
no, he's in a tough prison. He's in the Jefferson City Correctional Center, it's a level 5 prison. He gets out of his cell 1 hour a day. He's not in a youth prison.
So he's being treated as a very serious offender.
Absolutely.
So how are the family holding out on all of this? How has this affected the family?
It's affected us in ways that I can't even explain. I know based off of my experience with other families that are going through what we're going through, it's never anything easy. But myself personally, being as close as I am to my brother, he's my best friend. I would die for him. He would die for me. To be away from my brother, especially knowing that he's innocent, it is literally the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with, ever. It's something that crosses my mind every day. And I'm honestly thankful that him and I are so close, especially in his situation, because I don't feel like most families would fight as hard as we have fought for David.
In all of this, has it caused ill feeling, but any form of bad feeling with his older brother, Matthew?
You should definitely watch the show. He was actually asked that question by the lead detective that was investigating the case on the television show, and actually David's answer was he loves Matthew. He understands that they grew up in two different type of ways. David grew up with a loving family, with a roof over his head. Our older brother Matthew didn't. He grew up in and out of family homes, and he understands that he's got a lot of issues. But all of that aside, David is a Christian man. He practices forgiveness, and he forgives in any way possible. And he has forgiven Matthew, and he loves him, and would still, he's still his brother.
And how has Matthew taken all of this?
I don't know personally, because I have not spoken to Matthew. But coming from David, Matthew is very sorry, and he wishes that he could take that night back. He wishes that he never would have taken David with him. He wishes none of it ever would have happened, and Matthew does feel responsible.
So, although there's not an issue with David and Matthew, there's an issue with Matthew and the rest of you.
Yes, I believe David and we believe the same. Forgiveness is everything. And although I have not verbally spoken with Matt, although he's never asked for my forgiveness, in my heart, I do forgive him. We just don't have any kind of relationship.
It's a very tough call, isn't it? I mean, because on one hand, you've got a brother who actively behaves this way. And upon hearing, although I haven't gone into it much, upon hearing your description of what took place and what happened and what the charges were, apart from the murder, there was also the aggravated burglary. And although you're saying at one point they were defending the woman that was being attacked, the question that I'm asking myself is, was the people that were doing the attacking, were they the ones that had been burgled?
Actually, here in Missouri, there needs to be an underlining felony. So, for an example, in order to charge any of them with first-degree assault, which is a felony, there needs to be an underlining felony. In Missouri, if you force yourself into anybody's home or property, and if a felony takes place, and in this case, the assault took place, it's automatically first-degree burglary. Nothing was ever stolen. But because they forced entry into this home, it is considered first-degree burglary because there was an underlining felony, if that makes any sense at all. It is very, very hard to understand.
It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense because in effect, what they're doing is they're creating a charge, a non-existent charge, in order for them to implicate another charge.
Exactly.
Which is even more
Missouri.
serious.
Exactly. Missouri and two other states in the United States are there's 3 states who goes by this law. It's called the felony murder law, the felony murder rule. And in this specific case, it is being applied to David very, very unfairly. And that is the only reason that he was convicted, is because they were able to charge him with the first-degree burglary because Matt Marshall admitted to kicking in the front door. However, it has come out since then, Matthew Marshall never kicked in the front door. The owner of the home's daughter willingly let them in. She was with them moments prior to all these crimes taking place. However, Matthew Marshall never would have got the deal that he got unless they could have charged David with what they charged him with, so they needed that underlining felony. They had to charge David with burglary in order to charge him with assault.
Okay, so now I think we're gonna close this up in about 10 minutes time, if that's okay with you, because I don't want to stretch this out more than the information that we have available to us, and the technical difficulty is making it very unclear at times. But how are you getting on with the appeal? How is that going?
We just got an answer to his first appeal on June 30th, and it was denied. The first appeal was that the felony murder rule in Missouri should not have been applied to David. That appeal was denied. So our next step now, and actually we've already have appealed it to the Supreme Court of Missouri. We're waiting for an answer to see if the Supreme Court will overrule the appeals court decision.
And are you confident on getting that decision?
I'm not, no. No, it very rarely, I'm sorry.
But you will keep on battling on, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, David's got between another 14 and 16 years to serve. I mean, that's another 14 to 16 years we will fight if we need to.
You know, all I can say is it's been a pleasure speaking to you, but more importantly, it's David must be honored to have you as a sister.
Well, I really appreciate that. That's very kind. And yes, he is, I can tell you, because I mean, we're, you know, pretty much the same person. He is honored to have me as a sister, and even more so, I'm honored to have him as my brother.
So people that are listening to this particular show, and you know, I will send you the link afterwards that you'll be able to share this interview with anybody that you want on YouTube, via YouTube. And what can people do if they want to help support? Is there a website? Is there a link that they can go to? How would they support you in fighting for David's justice?
They can find us on Facebook at David's Life Matters. I actually have a Facebook page just for David. It's David Johnson. There's a picture of David, my mother, and myself. And I speak to everybody, his supporters, his friends, and his family through that Facebook page. I answer questions. I am more than happy to give David's address. David, he does this thing. He posts a song of the day. That song is posted on his Facebook page every day, and that's the best way to communicate with David and us to get answers about his case. And also his address, if people want to write him, is on there. The best way to support David, honestly, is to spread his story, because there will be a point in time where we're going to need everybody's support. There will be a point in time where we're going to have to rally out of the state capitol, and we're going to demand answers. Fortunately, that can't happen right now because we are going through appeal processes at the moment. But the more people that David have behind him, the better off David's going to be. We don't have money for paid attorneys, and everybody's support is what is going to bring David home in the end.
Well, here's the thing. Over the next few weeks, although I've done a lot of police brutality, unlawful killing, stories out in Syria, Iraq, and Palestine, and we've done quite a few wrongful convictions as well. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing quite a few shows revolving around wrongful convictions. And we're also planning to have a round table in the next couple of months with ex-exonerees, in other words, those that have already been freed from wrongful conviction successfully. There's going to be about 7 or 8 ex-exonerees on a live show talking about the battles that they had going through this wrongful conviction procedure and the battles that they had getting free from jail, along with some other expert support. An ex-chief of police will be on the line, and we'll probably have a lawyer, barrister of some sort, solicitor of some sort, legal attorney, somebody who can give us some real legal reference. And hopefully we'll try and get your story put up on that as well, so that we can open that up into a further investigation. There'll be a few stories that we're going to be looking for to put into that arena, so that these ex-exonerees can look at it as well and maybe give some pointers if you've not already got through what you need to get through. But I just wanted to thank you for coming on Issues Today and sharing your brother David Johnson's story with us. And we pray, we hope that God's will prevail in David's life, and that the justice will be seen to be done, because this to me sounds like a definite wrongful conviction. And as a young man who's in prison, that should be at home with his family.
Well, we thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to hear the story. It does mean a lot. And, this radio station, whether it gets to, people in our neck of the woods or wherever, it's really helped us, and we do truly appreciate it.
Well, just to be sure, you'll be able to take a copy of this and put it on David's Facebook page, when I send you the link, and you'll be able to share this link anywhere you like, so it will be heard anywhere in the world you want it to be heard. All people have got to do is pay attention and listen.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it, and so does David. Thank you again.
Heather, thank you very much for sharing that story with us, and we look forward to staying in touch and you keeping us informed of how this process is going.
Oh, I definitely will. You will be hearing from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. We're out of here.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now.